原林さん、砂川さん、ご参加の皆さん、こんばんは。最初にスウェーデン大使館と今日の実数のスウェーデンの原子力のセミナーに本当にようこそ。皆様にお会いできてとても嬉しいです。原子力は大切なことですね。スウェーデンでと日本で。日本で原子力はホットトピカルになりました。ですから皆さん英語で話します。すみません。Distinguished participants, dear friends, warmly welcome to our embassy today to a GIS lecture which is indeed about a very topical issue, an issue which is, of course, hotly discussed in many countries, including and above all, I would say today in Japan because of Fukushima Daiichi accident, but also in many other parts of the world, including Sweden. So Fukushima Daiichi will, of course, affect all of us, one way or the other, and I will come back to that. But let me first say that there are about 440 nuclear reactors in the world today, a little more than 440. All of them are not in operation, but there are about 440. 10 of those 440 reactors are in Sweden, and we therefore represent only a few percent of the total nuclear energy production in the world. But all the same, it is an important part of Sweden's electricity production. About 45% of our electricity comes from nuclear energy. In Sweden, we had a discussion about nuclear power, a very intensive one in the 1970s and in the 1980s. And in 1980, we had a referendum about the future of nuclear power. Essentially, we had the referendum because the political parties were internally quite divided about nuclear power. Especially that applied to the big Social Democratic Party, which had been in power for many years and which had a problem in handling nuclear power in relation to public opinion. So after the 3 Mile Island accident in Harrisburg in 1979, we decided to organize a referendum. And that was held in spring of 1980. And the outcome of that referendum was that we would gradually dismantle nuclear power, but in a sensible and well-balanced way without doing it too quickly. There was one line, or one of the options in the referendum was to dismantle nuclear power in 10 years' time. In other words, until 1990. But that was not what the majority wanted. The majority was in favor of dismantling, but a gradual phase-out. In the mid-1990s, 15 years or so after the referendum, there, of course, was continued discussions about nuclear power, and we then, through a political agreement across the political divide, you can say, there was agreement to abolish the year 2010, because 2010 was a date that was set by Parliament after the referendum in 1980. In the autumn of 1980, Swedish Parliament said, okay, phasing out nuclear power should be completed by 2010. In mid-1990s, we decided to remove that target date, abolish that target date. And the reason was, of course, that it was going to be extremely difficult and extremely expensive. So Sweden decided to continue to use nuclear power for the foreseeable future. At the same time, there was an agreement to reduce the number of reactors. We had 12 reactors, and we reduced the number from 12 to 10. One reactor was taken out of operation in southern Sweden in 1999, and the other one in 2005. And that was part of the agreement, so to say, to allow nuclear power to continue, but with fewer reactors than the full program contained at that time. In 2010, nuclear power had sort of made its return, you can say, on a more in a more full-scale manner, and the Parliament in 2010 decided to allow new reactors to be built, but not in addition to the 10. 10 reactors was still the maximum, and new reactors could be built, Parliament said, replacing old ones. And the idea was, of course, to make the reactors safer and more efficient. By saying old reactors can be decommissioned, can be closed, and new built instead. So that is the situation we're living with now. Nuclear power exists in Sweden and continues to exist and will continue for a number of years. I cannot say, and no one else can say, I think, today, for how long we will continue. We still live with the result of the referendum, which was to dismantle over time nuclear power. But we continue to use nuclear power, and nuclear power still accounts, as I think I said initially, for about 45% of Sweden's electricity production, compared to 30% in Japan. At the same time, and that is important to remember, there has been a very heavy, strong focus on renewable energy in Sweden. We have increased the share of renewable energy from around 30% in 1990 to more than 40. Some figures say 45% 2009. And we're aiming at 50% renewable energy in Sweden by 2020. And I think that is it's a target that we will reach. We, of course, are lucky in one sense in Sweden because we have a lot of hydroelectric power, and that is renewable energy. Nuclear power, even though it lasts long, is not renewable energy. So we hope to gradually, of course, replace existing energy sources which are not renewable with renewable energy. And we put a lot of emphasis right now on wind power, still accounts for a very small part of our energy production. But wind power and today, of course, bioenergy, bioenergy in different forms is growing rapidly, and hydroelectric power is going to continue to play a key role in our energy production. If we were to dismantle, and many people, of course, after Fukushima say, shouldn't we try to get rid of nuclear power quicker after the events in Fukushima? Many people, not only in Sweden, but all over the world, say that now is the time to move more decisively into renewable energy. And I think we will, all of us, move into renewable energy even more. But if we were to dismantle nuclear power completely, very rapidly, there is only one way we could handle the situation, and that is to drastically increase the hydroelectric power that we are producing. It's only that way that we can sustain an energy production which is going to take us through the next 5-10 years. So if we decide to reduce drastically nuclear power in Sweden, we would have to replace it in short term at least with hydroelectric power. Renewable energy has grown and will continue to grow in Sweden, and I am sure renewable energy is going to be very important also in Japan. And let me just give you, if I can, a quote, but I couldn't. No, it was something that I had to do, which I didn't.
No, it's powered.
I want to give you a quote from one of your newspapers that we read, and I don't know if there is anyone here from Japan Times tonight, but Japan Times has shown a lot of interest in this subject, and therefore I'd like to give you a quote which is taken from one of their editorials recently. Setting clear goals for increasing the percentage of the country's energy that comes from renewable sources, as well as government support for new energy resources, should become a top priority. And I think your government has indicated that Japan will now put much more effort into renewable energy than it has so far done. And Sweden has shown that it is possible to increase the share of renewable energy. We have, in fact, the largest share of renewable energy in the European Union. Not least because we have a lot of hydroelectric power, but also because we have the fortune of having a lot of forests, and forests produce a lot of biomass that we can use to heat our houses. So I think if we are talking about lessons from Fukushima or consequences of Fukushima, I think one of them will be more effort should go into renewable energy. Japan is well placed to and has very good technology in the field of solar power. The other one is, and I'm sure your Prime Minister will speak about this in Europe today, he is attending a G8 meeting in France and is going to also talk about the safety of nuclear power and new safety standards. New safety standards obviously will have to come into the discussion. And we have in Sweden said that Fukushima accident must will lead to a report, or we are going to produce a report, or our radiation authority, Radiation Safety Agency, SSM, Sweden's NISA, is going to produce a report about the implications of Fukushima for our own nuclear safety. We don't have tsunamis, we don't have earthquakes, at least no serious earthquakes in Sweden, but we could imagine that there are situations when our cooling systems will also be affected. So we are going to study the consequences of Fukushima for ourselves. And some of you may have noticed that the United Nations Secretary General, he has also initiated a big UN report on nuclear safety to be discussed at the summit meeting in September this year. So, obviously, safety standards will change. Now, we don't know what those new standards will be, but I can at least predict one thing, and that is that the standards will mean increased cost for the nuclear energy companies. The energy companies will have to produce in the future at a higher cost. The question is how high, and no one can tell today. But if nuclear energy production becomes considerably more expensive, well, then of course it will be easier for other forms of energy to compete. And I think the future of nuclear power will be, not only in Japan or in Sweden, but across the world, will be a function of can it be produced safely enough, and can it be produced at prices that are competitive enough. And that, I think, is going to be the two crucial factors. Sweden will have to continue to rely on nuclear power for the foreseeable future, even though we have said dismantling at a reasonable pace. It will take a long time before we can do that. Of course, the Swedish case is not, I mean, public opinion is not as divided about nuclear power as it was in the 1970s and in the 1980s. It is less of a hot topic today in Sweden than it was in the 1970s and early 1980s, or until, I mean, of course, there was the Chernobyl accident in 1986, which again placed nuclear power on the political agenda. But gradually, of course, we moved in the 1990s into a situation where politicians said we must, for the time being, continue to rely on nuclear power. How long is almost impossible at this stage to say. But no doubt, Fukushima is important for Japan, Fukushima is important for Sweden, and Fukushima will be extremely important for the rest of the world, especially those countries who continue to use some of those 440 nuclear reactors that we still have in across the globe today. So let me thank you for your attention. Our science office head of the science office in the embassy, Professor Carlson, will go more into the details about the nuclear program. But I know that we will have a growing debate about this. Fukushima Daiichi was, of course, a dramatic event, continues to be dramatic, and continues to be in the center of attention of not only the Japanese people, but also the people of many other countries, especially those who use nuclear power. So, 皆さん、今日のセミナーが皆様にとって有益なことを希望します。ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much.